Great to see everyone here this evening. I'm going to be very brief in my introduction because Matt has said to me that he was going to go and just talk a little bit about where he's coming from anyway as part of his talk this evening. We're absolutely thrilled to have Max with us here this evening. Max Krzyzanowski.
Thank you very much, Ashling. Thank you very much all for coming here this evening. And thank you to Jane and Michael for inviting me down. It's very good of you all to give up an evening to listen to me talk and hopefully engage in conversation with you all, because I'm also very curious to hear your opinions and your views. And Michael has given no pressure to me by telling me that this is the first time he's missed a football match this World Cup. And so I hope to justify this gamble that he's made with his Tuesday evening. So just to, first of all, to say what my position is, I am an atheist. In the very specific, literal, semantic sense, I am atheist. I disbelieve in all gods that have been purported. And this is to make a distinction from atheism, which is the concept that there is no God or no creating intelligence or anything like that. I happen to be very skeptical of that as well, but I think it is a philosophically respectable position. But any of the gods that whose biographies and memoirs litter the world and animate hundreds of millions of people, they are laughably easy to dismiss because of the sheer improbability of them. And it is the case that something of the order of 55% of our species worships the Abrahamic God, and they tell us that these gods share the qualities of omniscience, omnipotence, and omnibenevolence. And it's, as I said, laughably easy to notice that. The first thing to say about omnibenevolence, you only have to read the scriptures to notice that they cannot be omnibenevolent. They pick sides in fights, they choose battles, they egg each other, their followers on to kill each other. So omnibenevolent, discrepant with the scriptures, but omniscience and omnibenevolence, I mean, the world just disproves that. I can disprove those two qualities being co-occurrent within one word, tume. And you can pick any other one-word example of that you like. But the simple fact is that the Abrahamic gods, there's 55% of our species beliefs, you can wipe off the table with a swipe. The philosophical respectability of atheism, it kind of stems from almost a technical observation, and that is you can't prove a negative. As with the theistic gods, probabilistically, it's much harder to calibrate an understanding or a conjecture about whether there is a deistic God. So I tend to leave that on the table for conversation in a room full of adults, if you like, whereas theism, I think that if you are in any way intellectually rigorous or honest, you have to dismiss. And so I kind of came here with the agenda of discussing religion and sexuality, and to kind of give examples of where I see this intersectionality. I'm not going to kind of try and pathologize religion and say why it does this. I'm just going to give you some of the observations that I have about where these two things intersect and what kind of outcomes happen. I'll give you an example. Just quite recently, a friend of mine who is a male nurse, and he qualified in his training in the Mater Hospital, and he visited the consultant's GP for some health issues, and he happened to mention the fact that he was gay when he was talking to the consultant's GP. And after the GP had addressed his health concerns, he said, look, off the record, I just must tell you that I think that you should seek employment in another hospital. Very likely that when the seniors in this hospital find out that you're gay, they will fire you. They'll find a way to fire you. It may be something as stupid as you bringing home a bandage in your coat that belongs to the hospital, but they'll find it. So there's an example of religion. You might also remember when about this time last year, when the abortion bill was working its way through, and the Mater Hospital board member proudly announced, we will never perform abortions in this hospital. That's just another example of how religion interacts with human sexuality. I noticed there was a wonderful piece, I'm sure some of you must have read it, by Carol Hunt that Ashling, you posted, and where she spoke about the lady in Pakistan who was brutally murdered a couple of hundred meters up the road. Lahore is not a small city, by the way, nor is it provincial. So a few hundred meters up the courthouse from Lahore, where her relatives and her husband stoned this pregnant woman to death. And I remember reading the apologetics from the police saying, oh, these are country people, you can't expect them to understand this morality. Well, there were police on site while this murder took place in broad daylight on a busy street in Pakistan, and this woman committed no crime, could be indicted on nothing that would ever warrant any punishment, let alone a brutal public murder, and the police stood by and did nothing. And this is the sort of interaction and energy that, in my view, religion has when it intersects with human sexuality. If you were to take the Catholic Church at face value, the list of things that it prescribes is quite telling. I mean, masturbation, for a start. The question arises, if God is so against masturbation, why it is that men who masturbate regularly suffer less prostate cancer. Why would those incentives stack up like that? Contraception, I mean, I probably don't need to elaborate enormously on the harm that is done by the Catholic Church and its stance on contraception in sub-Saharan Africa alone, the millions that have died from AIDS. It may not be the case that all of those people will be saved, or even a large proportion of it, definitely some of those people. There is a genocidal aspect to how these doctrines map out onto human populations, onto human societies. I work with a group called LGBT Noise, and we campaign for full equality for lesbian, gay, bisexual and transgender, as the LGBT has, but also for intersex people, asexual people, questioning people, anybody who has a sexual identity that is other than heterosexual or male or female, neat boxes. Those people, we argue, should have the same laws applied to them, the same rights, the same entitlements, and the same dignity and respect in society. The question arises about why there is a congruence between, say, atheism and the campaign for sexual and gender minority rights in society. The first thing that occurs to me in response to this is the fact that in most places and times, atheists would have been declaring themselves atheists at some risk to themselves. It was not a straightforward thing to be open about disbelief in the supernatural or the prevailing sect where you lived. That carried a penalty, a social penalty. It might even carry a cost in terms of physical harm or indeed your life. I'm reminded of Stephen Fry talking about the Catholic Church. Many of you will have seen the Intelligence Square debate, where he says that within a mile of where they were having the debate, the Catholic Church used to burn people for the crime of owning a Bible in English, and that the Catholic Church's self-proclaimed mission of spreading the word of Jesus is just utterly refuted by knowing that one fact. And it is the case that most non-believers are, to an extent, we're a prisoner of these facts. We don't turn away from them, we don't brush them aside. And it is the case that when you argue for sexual and gender minority rights, that some of those salient facts leap out at you. And I think the value of conversations like this and the intersection between groups that are advocates for civil society and secular humanism, enlightenment values, reason, evidence, trivial things like that, is that we can fashion arguments out of information that is widely in the public domain and that can be used to persuade people who are as yet unpersuaded of the futility and the harm that religion does. And we're facing into a referendum, as many of you know, concerning marriage equality. It's our hope that it will be, first of all, it will definitely be held, that the government won't fall, that other political contingencies won't intrude, that it will have a high enough turnout and that the majority in favour will be overwhelming. I don't just hope that because, first of all, I may want to get married, that isn't the animating factor, or that I feel that my friends who want to get married should be allowed to get married, although that is part of it, or that society should be equal and relationships should be treated equally, although that is a very big concern of mine. Part of what I hope will be accomplished by the marriage equality referendum is we have so many things stacked against us as secularists. The way the wording of our censuses is done and the order in which they're done throws enormous advantage to the Catholic Church by putting top and centre religious faith Catholic first underneath it, rather than are you of a religious faith. And so the Catholic Church reaps an enormous dividend by being able to claim that it speaks for all of us here and that it has some sort of monopoly on the moral input into our social legislation. And I think that a referendum against same-sex marriage will be a great way to undermine that. A really hard piece of evidence against them. I mean, you know, we've had the referendum, the X-case referendum, where the right of a woman to travel was very narrowly passed, and I don't think that was enough of a kick in the teeth for them. I'd like to see something a bit more robust. So I'd hope, in some sense, to energise all of you to engage with your circles, to get them out there, because this is part of that larger campaign. I see LGBT rights as part of a much bigger conversation about how society interacts, how people and individuals and institutions treat each other, and what are the power gradients there, and what are the outcomes there, and this is part of that conversation. And so I'm going to throw it open to discussion and questions, because, as I said before, I'm very interested in other perspectives, and I also think it's a good way to kind of dig into seams of curiosity and things like that. So has anybody got anything